welcome everybody who's joining us. I hope you can see and hear us okay. Please do use the chat, by the way. So I just want to introduce to you Tabea Iseli, who is our guest today to talk about her wonderful game, Ava. We're going to have a really nice session which begins with some sharing of imagery and iterations of work that went into the game making, and we'll move through the story of how the game came about, and then some really practical considerations about Tabea's journey, her developer's journey, and how she how she moved through the complexities of budget constraints and came out the other side with a wonderful game which has had some great reflections and great responses. So we're going to talk about all of that. I'm saying hello to Jan in the chat. Jan is one of my students, so welcome, Jan. It's lovely to have you with us. And so I met Tabea 2 years ago at the Women in Games conference when, Tabea, you were talking about the game that you were going to make. And now here you are with a finished game, which is amazing. It's a great journey. Would you like to just talk about it and share your screen with us and show us some of the work that went into it?
Absolutely. Give me a second.
Thank you.
So there we are. So I'm going to just show you several screenshots of the game and some GIFs. And Sharon actually asked me to, have a special focus on how the game changed over the years. So it has been 3 years since we have been working on the game. And the first inspiration basically was Dragon Age Inquisition. I don't know, maybe some of you know the game. I personally never played it, which is a shame. I know. However, I was so inspired by these Dragon Age Inquisition tarot cards, and I really wanted to do something similar. And in that summer, I actually had the time. So I started working on that. And this one was the first illustration I just did at some point in my free time. As you can see, doesn't really live up to the inspiration. But I was really inspired. And when I finished the illustration, I just felt like, well, I'm a game developer. I like when things are interactive. Wouldn't it be super cool if this illustration would be interactive? So I went ahead and made another illustration. And as you can see, we have some animated things in there. We have some particle effects, and we have actually interactive elements in there. So you can move the woman's veil, and you can move these fruits and so on. And I realized that this would be a great idea for a puzzle game. So yeah, I went ahead. And during the process, I started to look more into fairy tales. So we came from these Dragon Age tarot cards and went into fairy tales because I felt like, well, fairy tales have a story, so we could have a game with a story. And they also have these beautiful illustrations in the book. So it's always, kind of this page with a story, and then you have this wonderful illustration. And I felt like this would be a great base for a puzzle game. So I went ahead and made this prototype where you have this fairy tale book, you have the story, you can turn the page and solve a puzzle. And yeah, that's where a lot of changes started to happen because, we went from tarot card to this fairy tale, and we started to do more and more fairy tale stuff. We had to redo several illustrations because we just felt like it didn't match the style, or the puzzles were not fitting. And since the illustration and the puzzle are basically, one and the same, you had to change everything. One thing that went through, I don't know how many iterations, was the UI in particular. I feel like we did it 3 or 4 times. And we really had this iterative process where we would leave stuff in the game, even though we knew it's not perfect yet, but we just don't have the time. We will fix it later. And I love that process, but I still think we're in the middle of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there would be more changes in the future if we do like a director's cut or, you know, the definite edition of the game or something like that. One big change that I would like to mention is that we actually, you know, I mentioned earlier, we went from tarot cards to a fairy tale book, and we actually reversed that like 1.5 years or 1 year ago. So we went 180 degrees backwards again because we started to show the game at conferences and fairs, and we realized that players prefer the tarot card aspect, or they're much more interested in the tarot card aspect of the game than in the fairy tale aspect. And we started to realize that it's mostly, or a reason for that also was that we wanted to make a game about being a minority member, about diversity. And when we talked to the players, we realized that for a lot of them, tarot cards actually were part, or tarot was part of their journey in that topic. We had several players telling us that they started to do tarot by themselves to claim back power over their lives and stuff like that. So we realized that the tarot cards were not just, you know, a beautiful, pretty inspiration for the illustrations. It was actually an important part of our message and a part that really resonates with people when it comes to these topics that we wanted to talk about. So we went back from this, you know, paper texture, paper colors, book aesthetic to a more tarot card aesthetic with mysterious color schemes with purple and these cosmic background stuff. And we started to implement more visual elements that resemble cards rather than books. And we also started to go back to tarot cards more literally. We started to look at tarot cards and study them. What is their meaning? What do the visual elements in the tarot cards actually mean? So these are two examples from the 4th chapter, which is not even in product, or you know, it's not, we finished illustrations, but it's not even in the game yet. So that's actually a sneak peek. And we started to work more with these traditional tarot cards. On the left, you have the High Priestess, where we had these elements of the globe and the moon and the scroll. And on the right, we have the Fool. So we tried to implement these major arcana way more in the game, and we almost got every card in because we also had to see if it fits with the story of the game and so on, but we almost managed it. So we're pretty proud of that. So one last thing I also wanted to talk about is how the illustrations changed over time. And this is actually mostly due to our story, because we realized, well, if we want to tell a story about, or if we want to make a game about diversity and being a minority member, it's not enough to just tell a story. It's also important who's behind the game and what's the vision of the team behind the game. So this slide is from the 1st chapter of the game, which was mostly illustrated just by me. And we wanted to have a more diverse team as well, to have artists and team members from around the world, from different backgrounds, from different cultures, to really support the message we're trying to send. So this is the first chapter. Then here we have some illustrations from the second chapter, which were already made by more illustrators. And you can really see how the illustrations change, how they become more unique. And here we have illustrations from the third chapter, where almost every level is made by a different artist. So that's one thing that really changed a lot from the beginning, and that's really close to our hearts and is really important to us. So yes, that's basically it in terms of pictures.
Thank you so much for sharing those beautiful images. And it's so fascinating to learn about how things changed from the beginning through your ideological viewpoint of your project. You know, you were bringing in people from all over the world and being very flexible about, you know, also embracing the idea of very different art styles within the game. That was a big change, wasn't it? It's
absolutely.
That's a huge example of how you can throw away one idea and replace it. If you're not precious about it, you can really replace it with another idea which is more valid. It's very, and we had a sneak peek, which is very also really always good. So I wanted to talk to you about the story origins, because this is a really important aspect of the game and how it came about. So could you tell us a little bit about your starting point and why this game came around and what you feel is important about its message?
Absolutely. When I started working on the game with these first illustrations, this was immediately after I left the last company I was working for before I started to do games on my own. Long story short, it has been a very toxic environment in that company. There was a lot of abusive management, and of course, there were also a lot of experiences when it comes to, you know, being a woman in the gaming space or in the game industry, which were, well, they had a big impact on my professional life. So I was working for the company, and it was really bad for my mental health, but I felt like I can't quit because I had been working for the company for just some months, and it really looks bad on the CV, especially in Switzerland. I don't know how it is in other places, if you just work for a company for several months and then leave. So I was very afraid to do that. So I stayed as long as I could, but after 9 months, I couldn't take it anymore, and I had to quit. I had to take some time to recover, to do some self-care, think about if I wanted to work in that industry, which has a lot of problems, which we all know, of crunch and sexism and so on. If I was able to survive in that industry, if I wanted to work in that industry. So this was basically the starting point, and these thoughts were important to me when I started working on the game, because I realized that I don't just want to make any game. I wanted to make a game where I can talk about the things that are important to me, especially because game development is not exactly a job where you're like, okay, 5 months, we're done with this project, let's move on. So yeah, if I wanted to do something, if I wanted to do a game, I really needed to, you know, be able to stand behind the message we're sending with it. And yeah, that's basically how the game started.
I have to say, you know, I so commend your bravery. You know, I'm sure all of our audience feels the same. So brave to say these things out loud, because of course, you know, it's difficult to say them. And what I find particularly, you know, inspiring, without wishing to be totally cheesy, which I am, but I think that you know, the the sort of marriage of ideas in your game between the purpose of it and its aesthetic and its meaning through the tarot. You know, you mentioned the taking back of power on the part of players of the tarot, and you kind of wedded together the reasons why you were doing this project and its substance. And I think that's just an amazingly kind of inspiring response to hardship. You know, it was a very difficult time, but what you did was you turned it around and made it a positive thing. You know, you didn't kind of leave. You didn't say, right, I'm not going to do this, because you obviously love game development and it's obviously the right thing for you to be doing. You know, but you did turn it around, which I think is just such an amazing achievement. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the journey, the developer's journey, having kind of looked at the story behind the game and look at particularly the practical constraints. So you were starting from a position of, you know, not zero because you had all your wonderful experience, but how did you set about making your own game? I mean, that's a very, as you say, it's not a project for a couple of weeks and then you say, yes, I've done that now, thank you. How did you set about, you know, approaching these practical constraints of budget and time and effort? How did you do all that?
At first, it wasn't actually a problem because it was just a project I made for myself. It was actually very important to me because, as you mentioned, you know, coming out of a bad situation and taking power back, it felt like, you know, being able to create something is the only way to change something about the situation. If you're just one person, you can't really change a whole industry, and you can't even change the circumstances for the people around you. But creating a game or creating something was just, you know, some way to do something. I think I just in the beginning I just started working on it. I was pretty lucky to get some support from the Swiss Arts Council Pro Helvetia, which is basically one of the only ways in Switzerland to get funding for game development. So they supported us in the beginning a little bit, and they their funding allowed us to actually fund our studio and found our studio. So that was great, and then it was just, you know, I feel like everybody who was and is working on the project, it's not a job for us. It's our passion, and I'm really, really, really grateful to have a team who has that way of thinking, and that really feels like for everybody of us, for all of us, it's a way to express our feelings. However, of course, if we are talking about, you know, healthy work conditions and being a minority in the game industry, it's also important to not just let people work for free. So we tried to find funding in so many different places for the game. And it was really hard because even though we all believed in the game, and we still do, it was just really hard to pitch something that is so far away from games, from the typical games that we know, and also is made for a different target audience. So, you know, like one moment that just stuck with me was I was pitching the game in front of a jury of 20 people, or 15, let's say 15 to not over exaggerate. So 15 people, and just one of them was a woman. All others were just men, white men in their 50s. And they just asked me, why are you doing this game? Because if you want to do a game, you should do something like Battlefield, because that's where the money's at.
Sorry, I'm laughing. But that's just, you know, that's a terrible thing to say to you.
I don't know. I mean, they're right. There's where the money's at, but, you know, it's not the vision that we are having, and not the audience that we are looking at. So yeah, it was just really hard to somehow communicate the message and the target audience and the reasoning and USP behind the game to actually get funding. And yeah, so
this presumably this particular panel, was not enthusiastic, but then somebody was enthusiastic. So what kind of practical steps, can we share with the audience about how you pitched your project? What kind of things did you think about when you were pitching it, and how did you present it?
That's a really tough question, actually. I think the biggest tip or what was important for us was finding the right institution or company that actually understands what you're doing. For us, it was the Arts Council. And basically, yeah, the rest was basic, where it was standard pitching. So for us, it was less what we're saying in the pitch, but rather, of course, you have to, adapt the pitch to every person you're pitching to. However, we felt like it was rather about finding the right people to talk to. And we're getting continuous support by Pro Helvetia again and again. So it's besides all the money and being able to work on it, it's just really amazing to have an institution that really stands behind you and really has your back, and again shows that they actually value what you're doing and they appreciate what you're doing, because 3 years are a long time without people basically saying, hey, I really like what you're doing here.
Yes, the creative process can be lonely if you don't have that kind of support. And it does sound as though you really did your research, and your research really helped you to find that audience in the practical steps of getting into actually being able to make your vision come true. So we're getting some questions, which is fantastic, and I'm going to save them up like gold dust and ask you them at the end. So I just want to then move on. So we've gone through the sort of the part of the journey which was researching and finding your backers. How about, so you talked initially about the importance of feedback from players. So, in the iterative process, you had lots of feedback from players who were talking about how they were responding, and they helped you to make that 180-degree turn that you mentioned about, in the creative process. So returning from the fairy tale path that you'd taken to the tarot. How did you set about getting that feedback during the process of creating? So did you set up a kind of pre-publication, platform so that people could look at what you were doing and play? How did you actually get in touch with that audience to get that important feedback for iteration?
We mostly did it through just going to conferences and fairs to actually talk to people. Personally, I think it's not the same to just send people a build and then send them a Google form or something like that and just ask them to answer questions. It was very important to be able to stand next to the players, to watch them play, to have actually a conversation about it that is also open and not just, basically or biased based on the questions you're asking in the questionnaire. I think that we wouldn't have found back to the tarot topic if we wouldn't have been able to just have conversations and chat with the players. For us, it was also important who actually was interested in the game, because if you're at the fair, you just have people walking by and you will see which people are actually stopping by and are interested in the game based on the artwork that you are showing at the booth and so on. And I feel like if you have to do this online, you already have to pre-select the people, or they are pre-selected by the people who are following you on social media and so on. So for us, it was really important to just have that organically at the fair. And also for us, it was important because it did reaffirm our target audience, as we would see, hey, it's exactly the players that we're trying to work for that are stopping based on our poster and coming to our booth because they're like, oh, look at this one, I want to see what it is, right?
I mean, that is lovely, isn't it? And we're all missing that kind of
absolutely
human interaction with each other. So we are all, I think, kind of thinking, when can we go back to those wonderful kinds of events where you can just meet people in person and establish that rapport. Do you think there are ways in which, so let's think about how the timing has been fortunate in some ways. So if you were at that stage now, what would you kind of recommend? What would you think of doing in the absence of those kinds of events? How would you start out now if you were, at that point in this kind of, situation where we're all being digital all the time?
Actually, I don't really know. I think it's new to all of us.
Yes.
We have been at some digital I'm forgetting the word, sorry. Like Gamescom expositions, expos. And we felt like it's as visitors as well as exhibitors, it was really hard to actually just browse and, look at all the things that are available. It was really hard to actually just find new stuff. And what worked best for us so far was still, even though I said social media doesn't work, it's still social media. Just posting about the things we're posting about the things we're doing. We're having a developer diary, or we're starting one. We started to just ask questions on Twitter, building focus groups. We started building a focus group, but it's still too early basically to say like, oh, this is the way that worked best for us. We're still exploring that ourselves. Sure. Basically.
And you have a little slide which is showing the sorry, we're in a small space and now I can hear some of them. Mary Claire and I are together in a small space. I might actually take you somewhere else while we're speaking. I'm just going to go downstairs. Sorry, everybody. I'm going to you're coming with me. I'm taking you all with me. Sorry. This is what we were talking about when we said embrace the challenge of the digital space, but it's in relation to the actual space. So I'm just going to take us to a new venue, a new exciting venue, where we can't hear each other. So I was just going to say, you have a slide, Tabea, which shows your Twitter details and everything. Could you share that with our audience? Because I'm really keen that everybody watching should be able to join your developer diary and follow your development process. I think it would be so nice. Can you share that with everybody? So we can...
Absolutely.
So the adventure, sorry everybody, the adventure.
It's also nice because it's a little bit, like the conference that is digital is kind of local too, because you're both at the conference.
So it's really lovely. No, it feels more real, doesn't it, somehow? And you think that somebody's not just in a kind of abstract space. They're alive and well and living in an environment that's familiar somehow. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So this gives us our the ways to follow you and follow your progress. And I'm so keen that everybody should be able to do that. I think we've kind of reached a point where I'd really love to be able to celebrate your success with this game. I know you're very modest about it, but your game has been doing so well, and you've been selected for the Smithsonian Indiecade, exhibition. So if anybody would like to just go to the Smithsonian Museum site, they'll find information about the game, and it's been selected from a very large pool of games for them to consider. And that's just such a wonderful result from something that came out of a difficult experience to make something so positive out of it, which now has all this wonderful recognition. So yes, I'm joining with Chloe and saying congratulations.
Thank you.
Saying in the chat, it's fantastic. I'm so happy for you. What are your reflections now, on the experience, and how do you feel in relation to what you've achieved, having had this recognition and, lots and lots of positive response to the game, which feels as though it's going to go from strength to strength? What are your feelings about it now?
I think for me, it was, I'm really happy that everybody who worked on the game had the passion and power to just say, no, we want to finish this game. We believe in this game, even though, like we mentioned earlier, there were some budget constraints. So at some point we were at the point where we said, like, okay, we just have $50,000. That's not a lot. That's not enough to make a game either. We just scrap it, don't finish it, work on something else, start something new that is more successful, hopefully, in terms of funding, or we just really make an MVP with just the smallest possible product, and we're trying to release it, and we're going from there. So I'm really happy that we decided to do the latter option and just finish it. Because
we're very happy too.
Yeah, it was important for us because at some point, if you're going through development and things are just not going the way you want, you just start to feel self-conscious about the game, and you feel like, okay, look at all these other games that are coming out. They're so much more polished. They do have so much more content. Why should anybody care about the thing that we made and want to play the thing that we made? And that's why I think that this feedback, this recognition was so important to us to realize, okay, no, there are people who care for the things that we do, that share our vision and our thoughts about the project and the topic behind the project. So I'm really happy we did that.
Yes. And I think that it's so interesting. The whole project has come out of moments of adversity, and I think that being able to respond to difficult things in a really positive way is terribly inspiring for other people. The idea that you can take the initial experience, which was awful, and turn it into such a positive project, and then at moments when the budget constraints and the difficulties of actually the practicalities of making a game were oppressive, and sometimes those moments that you described of a lack of self-confidence about the project come in and fill you with doubt or insecurity, you were able just to go, no, wait a minute, our audience is out there, we know who they are. We're not aiming for those people in the suits who were in the pitch, who were lined up and saying, this isn't the money making, the money spinning area to go into. We were convinced about what we were doing, and it came to fruition. So I think it's just a terrifically inspiring story. And what do you feel about the future? So if we kind of move to what are the next stages for you? What do you feel is next? What's coming?
I actually don't know. We wanted to actually finish the game like half a year ago, and we got some further funding so we were able to make more chapters, and now again we were at the point where we were thinking like, okay, so we finished we're working to finish the 4 chapters. That's going to be the end of that game. And now again, I can't talk about it yet, but there were again things happening where we were, okay, maybe the story of Ava is still not finished. So I'm really looking forward to the future to see where this is leading. I think it's a great start. The game actually, and the whole process of making the game did create our studio. It did create our vision as a company making diverse games for a diverse audience. And I really think that, or I hope that there will be a lot of more things for Ava, or also for our other project that we started working on.
So exciting! It's always, that's wonderful news. I'm so glad, and I'm sorry to bang this drum, everybody who's watching, but it's the idea that your ideology can form, the ideas and desire to work on a creative project can make something real happen, and that changes everything. I think is just fantastic. So I have a question from earlier from Jan, who's asking us, in hindsight, do you feel it would be better for you personally to have started working on your own game right away, or do you think you needed the job experience of working in a company first?
I think that's a really good question, because that's a question I asked myself a lot too. I did study game design before I started working for Swiss game companies, and I was working for other companies for like 3 years. And I do have other students that, graduated together with me and went directly into founding their own studio. So I had the direct, I could compare, and sometimes, especially in the hard times of working for other companies, I felt like the people who founded their own studio just were way ahead of me, and I did the wrong thing and made the wrong decision. However, I also worked for a company called Blindflug in those 3 years, which was an amazing experience. They create indie games based on political topics such as migration and nuclear war and stuff like that. And just learning from these people who have more experience than I had was so important for me. And also I felt like I was able to learn from others in a time where I wouldn't have had the experience or strength to do something on my own. No, I think in hindsight it was the right way, because even if the bad things wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't have made this project, and I wouldn't have this company and these beautiful and wonderful co-workers that I do have now. So it was great to just be able to work in the industry without having to shoulder all the weight of the responsibility myself. But of course, the other way works too.
Yeah. So perhaps, yes, you've benefited from both sides of that question, haven't you? You've kind of taken from both sides, and actually, I think it's immensely important also that you've benefited in the end from a very difficult period and a difficult time, and that's sort of I always think the best revenge is living well. Whatever the problem, I think the best revenge on whatever it was is living well and doing well. And you're just such a fantastic proponent of that. I think it's wonderful. Well, I've run out of time. So Jan is thanking you so much for your answer and saying he's asking because as a student, he's thinking about his options and he's wondering about the future. So it's great to have that answer. Thank you, Tabea. Well, I'm going to just wind up our session and just by thanking you so much and saying how very delighted I am that this has come to be and that you've shared it with everybody today. I think it's just a wonderful, fantastic and brilliant thing you've done. And I hope very much that our audience are as inspired as I am. So thank you very much, Tabea. And please do everybody follow the details on screen and follow Ava's progress, which sounds like it might be coming. There'll be more. Watch this space.
Also, feel free to ask any questions via Twitter. I will try to answer anything that I can if you didn't have the chance to ask questions now.
Thank you very much. That's really kind. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience who are getting in touch and saying thank you to Tabea. It's been great to talk to you. And what a great celebration of all of that work that you've done. Thanks so much. And
thank you so much.
Have a lovely rest of the conference, everybody. And Tabea, I hope you can watch some of the little bits and pieces if you have time. There's some great sessions coming up.
Absolutely.
You'll stay with the conference and stay with us and share some more information. There's a very, very good ending to the conference too, which everybody should stick around for, which is the funny women, who I think I'm just looking forward to so much because they look absolutely hilarious. But thank you, everybody, and thank you for your patience with me moving around and taking you with me. So hope to speak soon. Thank you so much, Tabea.
Thank you too. Thank you for everybody.